Hurricane Charlie did its best to spoil our holiday in 1986 with high winds and torrential rain. The village carnival was washed out, the dancing by the Shakespeare Morris men and even the duck race was cancelled. Nevertheless, we did manage to find quite a few interesting things and even saw the sun occasionally. We stayed in the picturesque Warwickshire village of Bidford-on-Avon, a few miles from Stratford. It stands at the crossing of an ancient trade route over the Avon. Remains of a Roman bridge have been found, and also an Anglo-Saxon graveyard. The nearby church of St Lawrence, built on the banks of the river, was moderately powerful. The oldest part, in the chancel and the nave, are 13th century, though the medieval nave was pulled down in 1835. The view from the church was beautiful, with Dover's Hill in the Cotswolds visible. We visited this stunning viewpoint later in the week, a National Trust property named after Robert Dover, who held the Cotswold Olympic Games here in 1622. There are two interesting leys nearby, one of which goes through the church. This also goes through the terrace where we were staying, though it just misses the house itself. The ley which passes through our holiday terrace and Bidford Church also passes through two churches near Coughton Court. This is a National Trust property in Warwickshire, home of the recusant Catholic family of Throckmorton. The mansion is a most imposing one with its four-turreted gatehouse, and it contains many interesting objects, including a chemise of Mary Queen of Scots, a cope allegedly worked by Queen Catherine of Aragon, and a coat made for a wager in a single day, from the shearing of the sheep to the completed coat. It was, however, the ley that led me to the court. It passes through the two churches near the house, over Oversley Castle Hill to the church at Bidford-on-Avon. From here it follows the mean of the Icknield Street for about 6 miles, passing through several crossroads. As leys go, it's perhaps not as spectacular as some others. In fact, a much better one, map-wise, runs along the site of the Elm Avenue, the trees now lost to Dutch elm disease, through the gatehouse. This runs through two churches and two cross-tracks in Worcester, and a lining stretch of road at Holbarrow Green, Coughton Court, Avenue and Gatehouse, the Norton Lindsay Church, and a number of other crossroads and aligning roads. Nevertheless, the connection of the first ley to Coughton's history brings some rather enigmatic facts to light. The Gatehouse and Avenue. After the Reformation, the family church, St Peter's, now the parish church, became Church of England. This solid-looking square-towered building was built by Sir Robert Throckmorton, Lord of the Manor, from 1486 to 1516. He was never to occupy the grandiose tomb in the centre of the nave, however, for he died on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 1518. In 1791 a successor, another Robert Throckmorton, was buried there. As would be expected, there are several other Throckmorton tombs in the church, including 2 in the sanctuary. Eventually, a Catholic chapel for the family was installed in the east wing of the house. This was destroyed by a Protestant mob from Alcester in December 1688, after which the saloon, on the end of the south wing, was used as a chapel until 1853, when the present Catholic church was built beyond the Anglican one. This is an unusual but pleasant stone building, with a narrow spire and a strikingly beamed high-pitched roof. When we were there it was particularly beautiful, as they were having a flower festival, and the interior of the church was ablaze with colour. The ley, as mentioned, goes through both of these churches of very different date, but the view from the roof of the house, open to the public, indicates something else. The alignment almost certainly passes through the site of the chapel in the now vanished east wing, as well as passing through the saloon. All 4 places of worship were on the same ley. Despite the sectarian divisions and those of time, the apparently universal subconscious urge to build places of worship, or, in the case of the saloon, to worship in places already existing, on leys, is certainly well illustrated here. The system is self-repairing. This is the message of the Coughton ley. Despite the fact the two Christian groups were at each other's throats in the 16th century, they were worshipping together on the same ley, adding positive energies to the system. Another striking example of this is the London Axis Ley, discovered by Chris Street, which links Westminster Catholic Cathedral with the Central Synagogue in Hallam Street, a number of churches of different types, and a henge monument to the north of London. The other ley comes south from Tumpbew Hill, where it meets the Coughton Ley, to Saintbury, an extremely interesting Cotswold area. It goes through a crossroads with an ancient cross, the latter about 2 yards off the alignment, unless it can be given this width, a mean aligning road, Saintbury Church, a tumulus, and a long barrow in not much more than a mile. Standing at the crossroads, one can see that it, the road and the church, and the tumulus, crowned by a clump, are in alignment. The church is perched on the side of the hill, with magnificent views extending to the Welsh mountains in the far distance. Entering it, I found considerable head-hum, and a number of other things of interest. Firstly, there are 2 rather mysterious stones in the floor, one in each transept. In the south transept is an octagonal one, thought by some to be pre-Christian. Little is known about it, but the builders for some reason abandoned tradition and built the tower over this transept rather than at the west end. A piscina implies the existence of a chapel in this transept too, though it's now a vestry. The stone in the north transept is rectangular and under a Jacobean communion table. This could be a former stone altar, outlawed by Cromwell's regulations against these. The ley could pass through both stones, but it certainly goes through the octagonal one. This ley is illustrated in the Ley Hunter's Companion by Paul Devereux, editor of the Ley Hunter magazine at the time, and Ian Thompson. I hadn't read this in 1986, however, so it seems that Paul and I found it quite independently. Paul and Ian's article on the ley in the Society of Ley Hunters website gives further information on the Long Barrow and other sites on it that I didn't find. They write, moving south down the ley, the next ley point is a long barrow, in the middle of a 60-acre Iron Age fort, 2 ley markers for the price of 1. The barrow is of course Neolithic, and this location underlines the Ley Hunter's contention of an evolved sites, with much later Iron Age structure surrounding but not destroying the barrow. A little further south, the ley passes through a Saxon pagan cemetery, not marked on the maps, on Broadway Hill. The ley finally passes through a farm called Seven Wells. We usually steer clear of farms, as we agree with Watkins when he observes that ancient homesteads often seem to be related to leys, but as there are so many of them, it's unwise to include them at all as ley points. But we wondered if there really were wells at the site, which, if so, would make a perfect initial point at one end of the ley, in keeping with Watkins' findings. So before leaving the area, we dropped in on the farm. We are glad we did. The farm is a group of buildings surrounded by a semicircle of trees. It was once a stopping place for stagecoaches. We asked the farmer's wife if there really were wells on the site. She told us that there were, and that the site had been known as Seven Wells from at least the 11th century. She also claimed that a goblet or chalice had been found buried in the curious ring of trees, and that John Galsworthy had written about it in a book or story called The Sword or The Silver Bowl, she couldn't remember which. The church booklet mentions another stone, the Kiftsgate stone nearby, said to be an ancient British seat of judgment. It took some finding in spite of being marked on the map, but was worth it, across a stile from the road and in a small wood. It's about 4 feet high, rough-hewn and with a hole right through it. It's a very peaceful spot. A ley passes through it, and the Saintbury stone. This passes through a crossroads at Willersley, a track junction just north of Willersley Church, and Saintbury Church and the Stone, the Kiftsgate Stone, a church in Paxford, the site of an ancient village, cross-tracks and church at Tottenham, Witchford Church, and a crossroads south of Barford St Michael. We drove over to Hereford one day and of course had to visit the folios of the Straight Track Club. It was exciting, as it must be to all ley hunters, to look at the old writings. Though we had no time to do more than glance through one of the boxes, a number of interesting things were noticed. Particularly fascinating was the huge isosceles triangle between Stonehenge, Avebury and Silchester, described in an article by the Reverend Arthur Cross. I know Silchester well, as my family have lived there for many generations. He is, however, mistaken in saying that the Stonehenge-Avebury ley goes through Silbury Hill. It doesn't, but it touches one end of the West Kennet Long Barrow. A ley crossing the triangle obliquely was also illustrated, passing through Eastbury, Chisbury, Amesbury, a bridge, Bishopstone, Badbury Ring and Flower Barrow. Another article illustrated a fascinating stone alignment near Silbury Hill, near the old Roman road to the west of the hill and on the Devizes side of Beckhampton. 150 yards west of the point where the road crosses the Devizes road is or was an unworked boulder. At intervals of 100 yards there are two more, and 100 yards further west is a prostrate pillar with a bevelled head. These all align on the south end of Silbury's summit. A photograph of the visual alignment was in the article. While in the Hereford area we visited Croft Castle, a National Trust property near Leominster. It's a Welsh border castle and contains the Iron Age hill fort Croft-Ambury, mentioned twice in the Old Straight Track and on the first ley found by Alfred Watkins, in its grounds. Croft-Ambury Hill Fort. A clump at Croft-Ambury. There are indications from the estate map on sale at the castle that the adjoining tiny St Michael's Church is a ley centre. It's quite powerful inside. It aligns with the Lime Avenue, and this alignment runs along the south wall of the castle to Cockgate Crossroads. A north-running line goes through two corners of the wall and a track multi-junction, and skirts one side of Croft-Ambury. Another goes through two junctions to the other side of the hill fort.